So the New York Times did a really good article about J.R.O.T.C programs in the United States. And for those who don't know what J.R.O.T.C programs are, they are it stands for Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, where it's kind of like a course class, a military course slash class, in which they learn military style uh, methods and techniques while in school. This could be high school, this could be middle school, this could be elementary, whatever the case. And so the New York Times did a really good lengthy article. I really wanted to read it. Unfortunately, it's a little too extensive and lengthy, and I don't think my listeners would have their attention spans. It would be challenged. Their attention spans would be challenged by me reading this because it reads like a story, giving anecdotes. Um, so it's like you're reading a story, not really an article. But so the New York Times article, it talked about how these J.R.O.T.C programs are being forced. This isn't no, it's no longer an elective, meaning you can't choose it to opt in. It's being forced, and even those students who have tried to opt out, have been denied opting out. Why are these JROTC programs a problem? So they're a problem for many reasons. One, they are the militarization of children. It forces them early on to think and have the mindset and ideology of somebody in the military. And it creates this kind of like cradle to war pipeline where these young children have their minds molded and brainwashed into thinking that joining the military is a good and positive thing. And so they are indoctrinating and grooming the next generation of kids and children to be toy soldiers for war corporations like Lockheed Martin, BAE/Bay Systems, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and all of these other war corporations that have profited the most from war. And so let me read you, instead of reading the lengthy New York Times article, let me read you a short article about this. It says, report students being auto-enrolled meaning forced, in J.R.O.T.C programs. A recent report from the New York Times found that thousands of public school students are being automatically enrolled in the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, J.R.O.T.C, which opponents have described as a troubling trend that must cease. I'm one of those people. The J.R.O.T.C programs are taught by military veterans. Another problem to that is that you have military veterans who have an incentive of, you know, pushing students into joining the military. So the J.R.O.T.C programs are taught by military veterans at some 3,500 high schools in the U.S., and they're supposed to be elective meaning a choice. The Pentagon has said requiring students to take the course goes against its guidelines, but the Times found that students are either being required, meaning forced, to take the classes or automatically enrolled in them, meaning they're not opting in, they're being forced. They're automatically enrolled in them. A review of enrollment data showed that dozens of schools have made the program mandatory, meaning forced, or funneled more than 75% of students in a single grade into the classes, the Times reported. Proponents say the program teaches discipline and leadership, while critics argue it's being used as a recruitment tool, which it is. It is a recruitment tool to throw more people at war, especially the more impoverished / low income and minority groups. You're not seeing rich students enroll in war. It's usually one, people who come from low poverty, low / economically low and impoverished areas, and two, it's minority groups, namely Black, Native American, Latino groups. These are the ones who are joining the war the most, and these are the ones who are susceptible to these courses. It's being used as a recruitment tool for the military and prioritizing obedience over critical thinking. That's true. They are prioritizing obedience, meaning following orders, and not challenging the status quo, not asking questions, not thinking for yourself, thinking individually, thinking critically. An effort to implement automatic enrollment in Chicago schools, and this happened in Chicago. Chicago is one of the biggest areas in which J.R.O.T.C programs are taking place. An effort to implement automatic enrollment in Chicago schools was derailed when activists and an inspector general's report caused the school district to backtrack. A Chalkbeat investigation found that the automatic enrollment was happening over the last 2 years, and Chicago Public Schools said it would end the practice. A social worker and peace advocate, Jesus Palafox, is one of the people who worked on the campaign against automatic enrollment in Chicago. You can learn discipline, you can learn certain skills, not just in military structure, but you can get that from an arts class or other programs. Why not include those other options? Palafox said Thursday on Cuomo. If we are really talking about options for kids, let's have other programs, not just a structure that is hierarchical, militarized, and predominantly in communities of color, which it is. It is predominantly in Native American, Black, Latino school districts and impoverished school districts. Among schools where at least 75% of freshmen were enrolled, the Times investigation found more than 80% of them, 80, were composed primarily of Black and Hispanic students. That was higher than other J.R.O.T.C schools and schools without J.R.O.T.C programs. So Latino and Black students, Native American, etc., they're often the ones who are preyed upon to join these J.R.O.T.C programs and ultimately join the war campaign, the war march, when they join up and sign up for the U.S. military. Last year, Congress asked the Department of Defense to diversity. You mean diversify? It says diversity. To diversify its enrollment for ROTC. But in this case, it was not that Latinos or Black students were not part of it. It was kind of the opposite. Palafox said minorities were overrepresented, which they are. Minority groups are overrepresented in war. They're overrepresented in these J.R.O.T.C programs and so on. In response to the New York Times investigation, a Pentagon spokesperson said the military doesn't ask high school students to make J.R.O.T.C mandatory, and schools shouldn't be forcing students to take it, except they are. And this Pentagon spokesperson in the Pentagon know exactly what the hell they're doing. Just like we are an all volunteer military, this should be a volunteer program. Commander Nicole Schwegman said. In Chicago, the school district's Office of Inspector General's report suggests a multitude of factors for the automatic enrollment, including principals wanting to use federally subsidized instructors to save money, which they do. Palafox contended the practice ultimately results in higher spending by districts. One thing we should keep in mind is that most J.R.O.T.C instructors are not academically prepared or have the education credentials to teach a classroom. Palafox said, most of them are retired officers, and by far you require more instructors than regular teachers, so it's costing the school district even more, though it's subsidized by the Department of Defense. And so they're preying on low income minorities. These children are forced into these JROTC programs. American taxpayers, U.S. taxpayers are paying $400 million for this JROTC funded program. $400 million a year. And that's triple what it was in the 1970s. The U.S. Army says 44% of all its personnel came from a school that offered JROTC program, which links. What does that mean? What does that statistic mean? 44% of its personnel came from a school that offered the JROTC program. Nearly half, nearly 50%, nearly half are linked. So it links these JROTC programs with students who want to enroll in the U.S. military. And so there's the link right there. If there wasn't a link, then that number, 44%, would have been much smaller. But they know there's a link between students who enroll or go to these JROTC high schools and students who ultimately join the U.S. military, which is what the U.S. government wants. It wants more human flesh to throw at their war machine, war campaign, and war march. Underfunded schools often partake in the JROTC program, and they do so to receive funding and save the cost of hiring teachers and creating an actual elective course that would have taken the place of the JROTC class. So they take these schools are often underfunded. Again, they're in low-income school neighborhoods with low taxes, and if you have low taxes, that means the school is often not as performing as some of the higher ones, and they're often in minority neighborhoods. And so because these schools are underfunded, they partake in this JROTC program to receive federal funding from the Department of Defense, aka the War Department. And so they save money there by receiving funding from the War Department, Department of Defense, and also save money on the cost of teachers, hiring teachers to create an actual elective course/class. And so what does all of this mean? You're indoctrinating, like I said before, ultimately what all of this means is they're indoctrinating and grooming the next generation of kids to be toy soldiers for war corporations so that they can post profits. We saw Iraq, we saw Afghanistan. We're going to see more of this in the coming future due to these JROTC programs where you have the federal government and the Department of Defense / War Department creating policies that are conducive to get people to join the U.S. military effort, and that's a backwards and primitive take. As much as America has a lot of backwards and primitive policies, this is one of them, and it's very scary to see. Again, children are being forced into these programs. This isn't something that is elective. And props and kudos to the New York Times for doing this investigative report. This is very important to point out, and this is something that needs to be stopped.